Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Boise, Idaho. We're obviously glad to have you. Has Western Caucus ever met you?
This is our first trip.
Yeah, I thought that was probably the case over the years. I don't remember. We've been all over the West and never here. It's really appropriate that you're meeting here because obviously one of the really top things on all of our minds these days is fire. You're less than 100 miles from the largest fire in the country and the highest priority fire in the country. We've had a really difficult fire summer here. It seems like we rotate between Idaho, Washington, Oregon, California, who gets the biggest and the most. When I was governor, we had one of those years where it was sky high on the fire. So we're going through that. This is also the home of the National Interagency Fire Center. For those of you who don't know that, it used to be NIFC, Boise Interagency Fire Center, and then they made it NIFC. How many years ago? Like 10 years ago or something like that. But anyway, this is where they fight fires from. And you say, well, why would they pick Boise, Idaho? By the way, my undergraduate degree was in forestry, forest management, to be specific, before I went to law school. So I guess I'm more interested maybe than others are in what happens in the fire lane and the fire ecology. But they had a really neat map at NIFC, and it showed all of the fire starts in America, and every fire start was represented by a red dot. And interestingly enough, the epicenter was Boise, Idaho. The tightest group of dots were around Boise and went out from there. And so that's why NIFC is located here. Well, it is appropriate we meet as the Western Caucus. I say that the Mississippi River gets wider every year. We have a unique set of issues that affect us as Western Congress people and the Western states. Trying to talk to our friends back east about this, they just don't get it because they've never lived in it. I think most of us were lobbied this week by our people from the counties or over schools. This bill. And that thing should be on a permanent basis. We wind up having to wring our hands every year. People back east don't get that. Fire, they don't get at all. As you all know, we've been successful. One of the successes we've had of getting BLM and Forest Service transitioned from what had become firefighting agencies instead of land management agencies. Their budgets were just getting consumed by firefighting. And of course, now we've moved that and trying to convince our friends back east that these were just as important as hurricanes and typhoons and all that sort of thing. It was difficult, but we were able to get the job done. So it's appropriate to be here. This is a great place to live and work. Here in Boise, we have a relatively mild climate. You can play golf here 12 months of the year, not every day, but you can play every month. I grew up in Wisconsin, and people from the Midwest that know this, that people here in Boise complain about winter. They have no idea what winter is unless you've grown up in the upper Midwest. So God bless you all. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you all for being here today. Coming into Boise, I know that's oftentimes, I guess Boise's easier to get to than Idaho Falls and stuff. But we appreciate all of you coming out here, and I want to have a special thanks to the Western Caucus and the Western Caucus Foundation for the work that they do. And especially the Chairman Newhouse of the Western Caucus. He does a tremendous job and has done of advancing Western issues across the country and bringing people in to see what is going on. So he's been truly an asset to me in trying to pass the Interior Appropriation Bill. He spends more time on the floor trying to convince people to vote for it than I do. So he's been critical in making sure that we get those bills passed that are very important to the West. So thank all of you, and thanks for the work that you've done in bringing the Western Caucus here. I also want to thank Simpson Company for hosting us this morning in their facility here. When I was a kid, I used to work for Simpson, not directly, but over in Southeast Idaho, I was 12, 13 years old, go move pipe and all that kind of stuff. I never realized that I got checks from paychecks from Simpson. Now I look for other kind of checks. No, I'm just, but they are, I think JR's license plate when he was around here was Mr. Spud. He invented dehydrated potatoes, which is what took off the small agricultural company to one of the major agricultural companies in the world. They're a very, very important part of Idaho's economy, and they do a great job for Idaho. So thank you to JR, and well, JR has passed away. I've always found it interesting. This is a guy that had an 8th grade education. When he died, I think he was 93 or something like that. He was getting up to go to work when he died, at 93. And one of the wealthiest people around. That tells you what ambition will do for you. And he's done a fantastic job over the years. So, but thanks to Simplot for hosting us. I'd also like to welcome today's panel. I'm not introducing them myself, but Zip and Cam and Gregg and Kim, thanks for being on the panel today. And just so we're clear, because I know this is confusing to a lot of you, Idaho has 2 congressmen, and one of them represents this district. You are sitting in my district. You got that? That's why we make Russ bring a passport when he comes over here. Anyway, thank you for coming, and we look forward to hosting you for the next couple of days and doing some fun things.
I want to just say welcome as well to Western Caucus and all of you who have traveled here to see us. Realize it's the first visit, and we love showing it off. You've been to Idaho, now you're going to get a good look here for the next couple of days. It's all downhill from there, okay? Because Idaho is that great. We're very biased about it, but we do have unique challenges, as Chairman Mike stated. Right now, of course, this is fire season. We have a lot of that tremendous amount of federal land. One of the things I did want to point out is one of the ramifications of having such a massive amount of federal land is that you're dependent upon some subsidies for funding in different areas, payment of taxes, SRS, and whatnot. And Congressman Simpson recently ran point on the Department of Interior budget, which includes the payment in lieu of taxes funding. Super, super critical, especially if these counties, Idaho County, Hawaii County, where there's almost no private land whatsoever. I think 3 votes would swing that overall package. And so I bring that up because these things are really, really critical to Idaho. And so the more visibility that we can get to our colleagues and to everyone, just the dynamic of the place we live is very, very important. And I too want to say thank you to the Simpson Company. What a huge impact this had on our state. If you're not familiar, I'm sure someone will explain it in much better ways. This is, my understanding, this is timbers from a chicken seller. Is that right, Ken? Did I remember that right?
We're all packing sheds out of Caldwell plant.
Packing sheds, Caldwell plant. So anyway, just an absolutely fabulous facility. Also, Simpson was a lot of the base money that got Micron Technology going years ago as a startup. And that was where I cut my teeth in the professional world. And so this company and the revenue stream and economic impact has had a massive influence, not just on Idaho, but on the country. And so very, very thankful, very, very proud of Simpson Company. So is it appropriate to start with our introductions, Noah?
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay, so we are very fortunate to have a couple of our colleagues here. And so I'm going to hand the mic over to one of them, Representative Doud LaMalfa. He's on my left here. He's from California's 1st district. And like my district, his is on fire. And he's probably going to tell you about that a little bit. But he sits on 3 committees, which is a little bit rare, but they're all very, very important. He's on the Agriculture Committee, where he's the chairman of the Forestry Subcommittee. So that's an incredible responsibility. Transportation infrastructure, say no more, and we also serve together on natural resources. So Doug, we're glad you're here,
Thanks, Russ.
and
Say something.
all yours.
And thanks for joining us this Western Caucus. I appreciate this organization. And Simplot, thank you. I've actually used your product on my rice fields in Northern California through the years. And yeah, rice grower, it's a major rivalry of the potato industry, so don't hold that against me here. But you guys just don't know where your rival. So, it's all good. We need to just keep up and make sure this quinoa thing doesn't get too bad.
So that rice isn't just small potatoes?
Let me repeat that. My guess is rice, small potatoes. My wife does make those small potatoes and mashes them all up on the cookie sheet. Those are pretty good that way. Anyhow, we're looking forward to a great discussion here on Ag Today, led by Michelle, and tomorrow please come to our hearing on forestry as well, and how critical that is, as was alluded to already. And the fire danger, yeah, it's true. We've got plenty of fire here. We just finished suffering a 430,000 acre fire right in the middle of my district, and a 1 million acre fire a couple of years ago through the middle of it. As well as you heard about the town of Paradise being destroyed and 85 lives lost, and also the town of Greenville and the town of Canyon Dam, just one after another. And it's getting really tiresome. We need to get these federal folks moving on management or get them out of the way. There's great partnerships we can be expanding on that to do that. So it's a great opportunity here this weekend, and I'm looking forward to the participation.
Just a little bit about my district. I represent the western half of Minnesota. So if you look at Minnesota, Canada, North Dakota, South Dakota, and one county short of Iowa, but literally that western half. Very, very rural, very ag, and my biggest town is 50,000 people. So have a lot in common. And I think that, you think of Western Caucus, but really, truly, we have so much in common that we are dealing with, whether it be land, whether it be ag issues, whether it be, fires and natural resources, like you mentioned with Congressman Stauber, because he represents that. And one of the things I will say about Western Caucus is we learn so much. I really, really appreciate being able to go into other people's districts, other people's states, and find out what's going on there, because we have so much in common. And we're facing so many of the same issues. So I appreciate being there and hearing about it. So, but I do want to welcome our panelists and welcome them down to come and put on their microphones so we can get started. Zippy, please, opening remarks.
Sure, thank you so much for having me. I think this is the second time I've been to the Western Caucus meeting, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity to come in and share the viewpoints of all American agriculture across this country. Just for those of you that's not that familiar with American Farm Bureau, we're made up of 6 million members across the country. We have a Farm Bureau and 2,800 county farm bureaus, 50 state farm bureaus in Puerto Rico. So I describe our organization as like a spider web that touches every community in this country, because those county farm bureau boards have 10 or 12 members on it that come from every community in their county. So we really do have a grassroots organization that does a great job and develops our policy book. So when we speak from those farmers' voices because they go through an extreme process to set that policy. Look, I'm that Eastern guy they referenced a while ago, so I'm not going to come in and tell you what you all be doing and what you're not doing. But I will tell you what I hear, because our Western presidents had a meeting last week and gave me a special invitation to sit on it through Zoom, and they gave me an earful about the wildfires. An earful. And I could not, in my 5 minutes, tell you everything I heard, but I tell you, they want the authority and the ability to be able to play a major role in land management, because they're the ones that's lived on the land for generations. They know what it takes to manage this land, and they understand the importance of timber harvest. They understand the importance of grazing cattle on that land. And I understand it because I come from the east. I live in the middle of a national forest that has trees dying in it. But outside that national forest, 98% of the land is owned by private people and private companies that are managing that timber. We do not have forest fires in Georgia. And if we do, it's very little. The only time I smell smoke is late January and February, because all the landowners are out there burning off that fuel underneath those trees, managing that fuel, making sure that we don't have those fires in those areas. So I do understand what they're telling me. And I heard the comment, I think Doud said it, they just get out of our way, we do the right thing. And I keep wondering how long the society out here and the people that's not on the land every day like our farmers and ranchers are, when are they going to say enough's enough and quit running a fear of lawsuits and do the right thing in managing our national forests that we're all proud of and want to take care of? And even when we do have a fire, at least not using a canned situation or a canned way of handling it. Look at what the land is, the situation around it, being flexible to recover that land and not preventing our farmers and ranchers to be part of that and be able to sustain their farms and their cattle herds for many generations to come. We all know what the effort is. The effort is to run the cattlemen off the land and let it go back and let nature take care of it. I'll tell you a little joke real quick. This farmer bought a place, it was all grown up and looked terrible. He worked on it for about 5 years. He invited his preacher to come out and have dinner with him one afternoon. And the preacher said, "Man, this is a beautiful place. God just really used his hand to make this a beautiful place." And the farmer said, "You ought to have seen him when it was in his hands." Jokingly saying it was a beautiful place, but it takes the hands of the farmer and the abilities that God gives us to take care of them, because he gives us the common sense to do it. So we look forward to continue to work with you. We have real concerns about the new regulations that's come out of the land bureaus about land management. It doesn't have clarity in it, and it sets another multi-use called conservation. And last time I looked, farmer was the first conservationist that ever lived in this country. And conservation in today's word is really putting farmers off the land and taking cattle off the land and letting it go back to nature. And that is not the way to be able to manage land with a lot of population land. We have to have the ability to play an important role in that. I will tell you, it's not all about, when I travel this country, it's not all about forest fires. It is out here a lot, but I hear everywhere I go, the number one issue facing American agriculture is labor. And I know how sensitive that issue is when it comes to the job hold and how difficult it is. We have got to find a solution to that. And we can't continue to work under a program that demands salaries that's running way far ahead of what the average salary is running in the general public out there. We can't be working under regulations that are stiffer than what every other business have to operate under. And we can't continue to put this pressure and burden on our farmers because a lot of our farmers don't have compliance officers and running around keep collecting data and how they're doing this thing. They're out there beside that worker working every day. He doesn't have time to do all that documentation. We need to take that burden off. We need to supply them with year-round workers. We need to find out what the need is. I understand the cap, but what the need is. Make sure that needs there so that we can continue to feed all our families across this country. It is in the best interest of this country and the people of this country that we get labor in here and get it done and get it in so that our farms can be sustainable, so we can sustain those jobs and have people working and creating the economy that evolves around agriculture in rural America. And without labor, our daughters and our sons are going to come out of college with these great degrees in agriculture, and they're not going to be able to come back and sustain a family on the farm. They're not going to be able to do it because they can't expand that farm and find labor to expand it on. And that leads you into what keeps me up at night, and that's who's going to be farming in the future. So we need to solve that problem. I'll end my comments by saying it's time we have Farm Bill. We are very appreciative of the extension that we got. But I will tell you, the current Farm Bill does not fit the needs of American agriculture today. Whether it's COVID, whether it's inflation, whatever it might be, it does not fit the needs that agriculture has today, and it is time for us to get this done. We've kicked the can down the road since the House passed through the House Ag Committee, a bipartisan bill for over 100 days with no other movement until lately. We've heard some conversations, of some good positive conversations going on between the four corners. Everybody wants to get it done. Let's get it done. We got to do it. And in the meantime, agriculture is in the worst place it's ever been. And if you look at the last week when the report came out about net farm income, it was down another, I think, 6 or 7%. But the last 2 years, it's down 23%. Now you tell me, can your household have your paycheck cut in 23% and you survive and sustain your family? That's what we're asking our farmers to do. 23% down on net income. The census said over the last 5 years we lost 140,000 farmers and 20 million acres out of production. How much longer can we, as the breadbasket of the world, continue to allow that to happen? Agriculture supplies this country with freedom to be whoever they want to be. I hear Secretary Bill say that all the time. Because the farmers, 2% and less of the farmers do what they do to feed everyone's families, everybody else gets to do and be free to do who they want to be. We are national security. We provide that national security and the economic engine that drives this country. And we need to have the burden taken off our back and let the system work. And we need those risk management tools to get through the difficult times, whether it be fires, storms, derecho, whatever price, low prices, to get through the next year so that farm can be sustainable for the future, passed on to future generations.
I'd like to turn it over to Cam for your opening statement.
Thanks, and thanks to the Western Caucus Foundation for doing this. This is terrific. It's my first time here. So my name's Cam Quarles. I run the National Potato Council. We are effectively the advocacy arm for this great industry. Potatoes are the most widely produced vegetable in the United States. You've got production, believe it or not, commercial production for seed potatoes in Alaska. You've got commercial production in Maine, in California, which is a top 10 state, in Florida, and basically all places in between. Over 30% of all that production comes from right now in the great state of Idaho. Minnesota is a top 10 producing state as well. And that geographic diversity, that breadth of our production, gives us a pretty good line into what people are feeling across the United States in terms of their relationship with federal policy and a lot of the things that Zippy was talking about that are keeping them up at night. I just have to say, by the way, that we're here in Idaho. The Idaho industry is incredibly well represented. Sam Eaton is here with the Idaho Potato Commission. They're a terrific organization that takes great care of their members here in Idaho. The activities that combined with this state, and we're obviously here in Simplot's headquarters, which is kind of a shrine to a great American small business story that grew up into a big business story. When you combine all of the activities, Idaho, across all of these production states, over $100 billion a year is generated in positive economic impact for the United States, and over 700,000 jobs are in some way dependent on the potato industry, on the activities that begin on America's family potato farms. We obviously want to make those numbers a lot bigger in the future, but when you sit back and look at that in aggregate, it is really striking. What's the job generation, the positive activities that are occurring because of these fundamental activities, national security activities that are occurring here every day. I'll just talk for a minute. Increasingly, I think the things that keep our producers up is kind of that looming government hand of regulation. The government is involved in a host of things that really matter to family farmers. They're determining where you can produce. They're determining what inputs you can put on your crops. They're determining what employees you can have on your farm, or agents of those employees who may want to cause mischief in your activities. They have a fundamental part in determining who your customers are, both domestically and internationally. And then most absurdly for the potato industry, and some folks may have seen this recently, they're also determining what you can call your commodity. We are embroiled in a big battle over the last couple of years about whether or not a potato will remain classified. I said initially it's the most widely produced vegetable in the United States. There is a debate within the federal government about whether or not we can remain considered a vegetable, or if we're going to be moved into another category. I had just as an aside, I had someone call me on a Saturday morning, and they said, this is to the viral nature of this whole thing. They called me on a Saturday morning, and they said, hey Cam, did you watch the Tonight Show last night? I said, no. Watch the Tonight Show that much. He said, Jimmy Fallon did a bit on potatoes as a vegetable in his opening monologue about how absurd that was. And these are the things that you don't think you're going to have to deal with as an association head, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with them. I could go into probably more detail than you like about why those moves are being made, but it is a very aggressive kind of activist hand that is being empowered by the federal government in creating that kind of mischief. And for the producers out there, they have a big question mark saying, why is the federal government doing this? Why are they involving themselves here? They would much rather want to be involved in partnerships. And trade policy is a place where we need the federal government. We need a productive partnership with our government negotiators in order to move the ball forward. The Farm Bill is another place where we can partner with members of Congress as well as the administration to implement a revised farm policy that will propel the industry forward. So potatoes, I mentioned, we're a vegetable. That means we're part of the specialty crop sector of U.S. agriculture. I'm one of the chairmen of the Specialty Crop Farm Bill Alliance. We got together over 3 years ago and put together a host of recommendations about how to update farm policy specifically for fruits and vegetables. The House Ag Committee's reported bill, to their great credit, reflects a substantial number of those recommendations. And we recognize that there are political and mathematical challenges in terms of getting that to the finish line, but that is a good bill for the specialty crop industry. It's not perfect. We would like to see it enhanced as the process goes forward, but that process needs to move forward. To lose that, the fear that I have, and it goes to something that Zippy was mentioning, the fear that I have is that the Farm Bill turns into the transportation bill or the child nutrition bill. And we're sitting here 10 years from now, in 2034, with fighting global battles with the tools of 2018. That is going to put American agriculture in a horrible, horrible spot. So I think I'll end with that, with a thank you to the members here who have propelled us forward on Farm Bill and appropriations and all these other things that have created that true partnership and really tried to make these growers a little bit more efficient. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I will head to Gregg and with the milk producers, and I will say I've got a few milk producers in Stearns County, Minnesota. So
Yes, you do.
Yes, we do. So please, your opening remarks.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'm new to the dairy industry, but I'm a Kansas farm boy and a K-Stater, and my first job out of graduate school at K-State was with U.S. Wheat Associates in Portland, Oregon. So I'm an old P&W wheat guy and a Kansas wheat guy that spent a lot of time out in this part of the world once upon a time. I've been in Washington a long time now. But these days I'm known as the trade guy, an ag trade guy in D.C. And so I want to take this, we're going to talk about trade here in a little bit, but I want to make one point. What's hurt us more than anything in the last couple of years, folks, is interest rates. And that's a double hit for U.S. agriculture. Not only does it increase the cost of our operating note, but it has caused us enormous problems in agriculture with regard to the strength and the value of the U.S. dollar. It has been devastating to us from a trade standpoint. When you go from 102 Japanese yen to the dollar to 106, that is an enormous tax or cost for the Japanese consumer for our product. It has cost us dearly. And if you don't believe that, and if you look at the trade data, there's actually only until recently, and there's been one country that's currency has stayed with the US dollar through thick and thin, and that has been the Mexican peso. That's the only country where our ag exports are up. I wonder how that works. It's interesting it works that way. But we need to talk about how do we get back on track in trade and agriculture in this country, because that's where it's at. On the specifically on the dairy side of the equation, we've had the federal milk marketing order process that we've gone through, and actually I'm going to say something nice about USDA. I think they've managed that process very, very well. It's enormously complicated, and the give and take and back and forth, they've managed pretty well in all of this. On the immigration issue, Zippy, I want you to know that every year at our annual meeting, we have an immigration luncheon where we talk about immigration. I canceled that luncheon this year. I think that tells you all you need to know about how much we've gotten done in the last year on the most important issue in agriculture. One of the best votes in Congress this year, in my opinion, has been the vote on putting whole milk back in schools. 330 to 99. A majority of both parties in the House of Representatives agreed to do that. To me, that is one of the most instructive votes that I've seen in my 32 years in Washington. And it is this: when you can boil an issue down to a point where everybody understands it, and it's really simple in black and white, members of Congress still know what the right answer is. It is when you get in a situation where you get a 10,000-page bill and several $1 trillion all wadded up in a stack of paper that's this tall, it gets really, really messy. And I think that's the message to all of us in this country is we've got to get back to basics in terms of our policy and what we're doing. Couldn't agree more with what's been said on the regulatory side. It's a nightmare, folks. One of the issues that we are dealing with right now are the dietary guidelines. And oh boy, are the activists involved in this. We are up to our eyeballs. I have met with new political folks in this administration who have been emphatic in telling me that these plant-based white liquids are equal in nutrition to milk. And I have been flabbergasted with our industry, with Secretary Vilsack, with everybody. How did we get here? How did we get to a point where our consumers think this? And the regulatory component of all of this is all intertwined in all of this, and how the FDA lawyers perceive this, and you know, we're now with repealing Chevron deference. I will tell you, at the end of the day, from my perspective, where are we headed in agriculture and all these regulations and all this? We're going to need a mountain of lawyers. We're going to be in court dealing with these issues for decades. This is the new way that we have to sort these things out, and it is going to be a mess. So I'm really encouraged about everything that's going on in Washington.
Well, there's one.
And we can talk about corn prices and the farm bill another day. So,
Well, thank you very much. And the white liquid issue is huge in my area. And I do sit on the trade subcommittee on Ways and Means, so I appreciate you mentioning that too. But last but not least, we are going to go to Kim with the Cattlemen, and please help you go ahead with your opening statement.
Great. Well, thank you very much. My name is Kim Brackett, and I am a cattle producer. My husband and I and our 4 children, we run cattle in southern Idaho. We're down in Owyhee County on the Idaho-Nevada line. And I also serve as chair of the policy division of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. NCBA is the oldest and largest trade association in this country representing cattle and beef producers. We have representation in every segment of the supply chain in every state of the nation. We are also driven by our policy that's grassroots driven, so making sure that everything I say today lines up with our policy book. Zippy, I agree with you on that one. When I thought about our topic today, talking about agriculture in the West, I realized that when we're talking about cattle production, we also need to have a parallel conversation about land management. I believe it was Congressman Fulcher that mentioned earlier today, most of Idaho is under federally owned or federally managed land. I believe it's over 60% of the state right now. So that right there really adds a layer of complexity when we're talking about how can we use those lands for agriculture. One interesting fact, more than half of the cattle in the western part of the United States spend time grazing on our federal lands. And I think that's really important for our discussion today for two reasons. First of all, it underscores the value of the forage on those federal lands for our national beef supply chain. And second, I think it demonstrates to you what an outsized impact these federal regulations have on food producers here in the West. I'm thinking specifically in the cattle industry, I'm thinking of NEPA, Endangered Species Act, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act. These are regulations that my husband and I have to deal with on a daily basis in order to ensure that we're in compliance with it. What it does is it's incredibly frustrating. When you look at NEPA over the past 10 years, I believe we've operated under 4 different versions of NEPA. Endangered Species Act seems to be changing on an almost annual basis in how species are listed or critical habitat is designated. All of these changes create this volatility that I have to manage as a cattle producer. And that's really what my job is, right? Is taking care of cattle, taking care of the land. But in some way, I have to be able to allocate my time and resources to managing this regulatory volatility that we deal with here as cattle producers in the West. I think that maybe the best example of that is NEPA. Every grazing permit goes through a monitoring and renewal process, ensuring that our natural resources are in compliance with NEPA. But I also have to go through the NEPA process if I want to make any improvements on my allotment. So if I want to put in a water line or replace a fence line, or say I just want to reposition a water trough for my cattle, I have to go through the NEPA process. This is a very long and tedious and complicated process. It takes years to get the approval I need. And while I'm waiting for this approval to go through, my hands are tied. And I know that I'm unable to provide better care for my cattle or better care of the land in that allotment. So incredibly frustrating. And I think that underscores why NCBA is so excited about the bills that were considered earlier this week regarding NEPA and ESA. And hopefully we can downsize that regulatory burden that we face here in the West from both of those agencies. I think we've seen a shift in the last couple of years in how federal agencies are prioritizing the resources on our Western lands. I have two that I want to highlight. The first of that is the BLM Public Lands Rule, which was finalized earlier this year. There's a lot of pieces to that rule, but the part I want to mention today is that they have elevated conservation to the same level as other multiple uses. So it's the same level as grazing, which has created a situation where a conservation lease, and this could be direct conservation or it could be conservation credit, it could displace a grazing lease, removing cattle from the land. So 2 steps right there. So now we're pulling cattle out of the beef supply chain because they're no longer able to access that forage. And number 2, that allotment is going into basically a non-use situation. So we're going to allow that grass to keep growing without cattle grazing it down, which increases wildfire risk for that allotment down the road. The second really large shift I think we have seen also in the BLM is their expansion of the Western Solar Plan. They've added 6 states to their plan, and one of those is Idaho. When we're looking at these utility scale solar fields that they are proposed to go in on our BLM lands, I think it's important to recognize that that is a complete conversion of the landscape. So not only are we not grazing cattle there anymore, we're removing agriculture from that land, but we're also removing wildlife habitats. We are no longer allowing recreation on there. We've eliminated the multiple use of that land. I think my overarching concern about that, larger than grazing being removed, is that it's incentivizing activist groups who are opposed to solar also because of the impact on wildlife. It's incentivizing them to pursue more stringent designations for that land, monument designations, ACEC designations. Any of those scenarios are going to result in either elimination or decrease of grazing on those federal lands. So very concerned about both of those from an agriculture perspective. And of course, adding to that regulatory volatility that I keep referring to. We do have some regulatory stability, which I am pleased to highlight in the Farm Bill. We are very anxious to get a Farm Bill passed at NCBA. Our top tier priorities are supporting voluntary conservation efforts, expanding the use of grazing as a conservation tool, because they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And finally, protecting the U.S. cattle herd in the event of a foreign animal disease outbreak. We are very appreciative for Chairman Thompson and his committee, the work they put into the House version of the Farm Bill. Very appreciative of the efforts there. I just want to wrap this up on fire. We've talked a lot about fire today. You can't be in Boise, Idaho and not be aware of the smoke that we're facing. I don't know the exact acreage. I think we've lost 6.5 million acres of land in the West fire this year. My husband and I have been very blessed in not having a fire down in southern Hawaii County, but I can tell you we have in the past. Several years ago, we had the Murphy Complex fire came through, and that fire itself burned 652,000 acres. It is the most catastrophic and terrifying event we've ever faced on the ranch. You truly don't know. You don't know if your business is going to survive, but you don't know how you're going to feed your cattle the next day. You are forced into a position of euthanizing cattle that were severely burned, that you've spent years, I'm going to cry, that you've spent years developing. You spent years developing those genetics, and it truly is just catastrophic. So my heart goes out to those folks that are facing fire this year. From a regulatory perspective, BLM and Forest Service, who manage most of the federal lands here in the West, they subscribe to a 2-year rest period after a fire burns an allotment. And that's really regardless of the condition of the allotment. So best case scenario, after these fires, after 2 years, I get to turn my cattle back out again at the same level, the same number of cattle. I get to retain the AUMs I had before the fire. Worst case scenario, this is going to take a long time, several years to work through this process. And if I ever do get cattle turned back out again, it's probably going to be at a reduced level. We also have extreme instances where they're going to close that allotment. They'll eliminate grazing altogether, which again is going to allow that grass to continue to grow. Fuel load's going to increase, and you're risking yet again another catastrophic wildfire. So a lot of topics for discussion today, and I'm anxious to get into the questions and answer portion.
Well, thank you very much. And we're gonna talk about a few things, and one of them is going to be the Farm Bill. But what I'd like to do though is looking at our timing, if we can limit to 2 minutes our answers, and I would like to invite particularly Representative LaMalfa, because you sit on the Ag Committee, and the other representatives to join in here. But I would like to get a little further into the Farm Bill. What kinds of things, I know you all mentioned it and mentioned some of the things. Kim, you mentioned a couple of the, good things that for your producers, but maybe talk a little bit about some of the things important, the strides that have made, and how important that 5-year reauthorization is, and maybe then Doug could add in what's happening now with the Farm Bill. But please, I won't pick on anyone. I'll let you volunteer, but so I'll need a volunteer. Who wants to go first? There you go. Thank you.
So from the specialty crop space, just very quickly, you've got a doubling of export resources for the USDA. Incredibly important for us, not only to open new markets, but also remain and thrive in increasingly competitive overseas markets. You've got enhancements to the specialty crop block grant program, which each individual state can make decisions about how best to increase the competitiveness of their own industries. State of Idaho will have materially different views on that than the state of California or Minnesota or anywhere around the country, but those resources are there to tailor them to what the growers need. And then one of the most important ones for us are we will be competitive long into the future because of solid partnerships on agricultural research. Those resources provided through the Specialty Crop Research Initiative, they will generate tremendous benefits. You're standing in a shrine to how effectively agricultural research, if it's deployed correctly, can make a business and an entire commodity thrive. We want to do more of that into the future. Last one, crop insurance. The specialty crop industry has kind of lagged behind in terms of effectively utilizing crop insurance. There's more encouragement to tailor products toward the specialty crop community in that House Ag Committee bill. It's a big undertaking, but in order to provide, when the specialty crop industry hits a pothole every few years, being able to provide resources on a temporary basis to producers to get them out of those ruts is incredibly important, and we want to see that move forward in anything that hopefully makes it to the president's desk.
Absolutely. And Zippy,
Sure. Start off with, if you're not familiar with Farm Bill, it should be a food farm bill because over 80% of it goes to nutrition products. Yep. Over 80% of it. And real quickly, the high points for us is the risk management tools. Crop insurance needs to be expanded to incorporate. All farmers take a risk, and they need some risk management tool, and crop insurance is a cornerstone. Title I programs are outdated. With COVID and the cost of production going up, the triggers aren't in the right place. It's not effective anymore. It needs to be modernized. We're very appreciative of the monies in conservation. Hope it can hold. The conservation programs have been over-applied for years and years and years. And now the money's there that people that apply can get, go in partnership with the federal government and American people to conserve the natural resources on our farm. And then, of course, trade is vitally important. It's already been touched on. But those are the key things. And the House bill goes a long ways to solving a lot of other problems.
thank you very much. Anybody else? Otherwise, members would like to add anything?
Well, I'll jump in. So.
Have your way.
Well, first of all, great panel. I wrote so many notes down there, way beyond 2 minutes, but thank you all for such a great insight on this. And, I think I'll focus, try to narrow it down to how it affects fire, livestock, etc. And so, first, one little fun fact would be kind of along the line that all of our dairy and cattle livestock combined is less than the amount of buffalo that were in North America before Europeans got here. So, and I'm sure that's the crux of what's wrong with why they want to move cattle off the land, is that it's a CO2 issue, or it's a methane issue or something like that. Plus, a lot of people in town don't seem to like beef, or dairy products. So, that's I think the political part. But it's critical in beef country that they're part of the landscape for grazing. I've heard talk. We need to have a pilot program. See if grazing is a part of the solution for keeping our forest fuels down in our lands. Wow, a pilot program in the 2020s. And come on, we got some geniuses here, but it's extremely important that what we're working on in the Farm Bill is more and more things. I'll talk a lot about timber tomorrow, but more directly here with the grazing aspect of it that we have included in the Farm Bill. And real quick on the Farm Bill, this really started out good. Chairman G.T. Thompson is a really good man. He will work with everybody. He's a nice man, but push him to the end, he'll get tough. By the way, for dairy, I just saw him as vehicle in the garage, he has a whole milk sticker on the back of that too. So he might have had to cover up the rice sticker that I gave him on that. I'll tell you the rice stickers later. It's critical that if we can get this farm bill done, and it looks like it's going to be pushed off to the lame duck session now. So frustrating because, as I said, we were doing so well. Field hearings all over the country. So the first stop was Pennsylvania for their annual, it was in January, for their farm show and state fair. And they had a lot of potatoes there too. So probably lots of potato products like the Zerko, But and they were bipartisan. Many in Florida, Texas, California, all around the country. And then all of a sudden it runs into a political problem. We were hung up all summer long waiting for a CBO score on the farm bill. And so more recently, now, we're stuck in this mess here before the election. So we have to hope we can get it in the lame duck session. And I'm sorry about that, everybody. I'm just as frustrated as everybody else on that. But the inclusions we have for raising is that if there's a disaster, we're moving so that cattle folks could use adjacent lands that maybe aren't necessarily a grazing permit and have a temporary place to land while this is recovering and being sorted out on burned out grazing areas as they have had. Heaven knows how hard it is to get grazing permits anymore. And like Tim was talking about, the conservation folks are coming in, buying them up and turning them into non-use. That's horrific. We've got to stop that. As well as other temporary measures to have those lands be part of the help of decreasing fire danger on that. We need to have a more aggressive ability to move these grazing allotments around to have that positive purpose, not just feeding the cattle, but the other positive effect as well. So these things are in the farm bill. There's categorical exclusions on the timber aspect too. Again, that's for tomorrow. So there's a lot of good things that can come from this. And I remind you too, the farm bill is still about 82% of the funding does go for the SNAP program. So the farm part of the farm bill is this tiny part, including the conservation aspect, which I heard that word voluntary. Thank you. That's very important. They remain voluntary. When they start talking about this climate aspect with Farm Smart or whatever the heck it's called, I get really nervous because we're going to get forced into something that we can't sustain. I still need to till my rice fields every year. I can't go to no-till on that, and a lot of others can't too. So thank you.
So everyone has done, I believe, a fabulous job of identifying why the farm bill is so incredibly important. And so, not being on the Ag Committee, I'm not going to try to re-articulate that, but to have a fair discussion, and it's important to point out why it has moved. And Doug just touched on why it has moved. Because it's really not a farm bill anymore. It's a SNAP bill. When you take 80+% of a $1.5 trillion bill and you focus it on food sustenance programs, SNAP, the old food stamp program, one can argue it's not a farm bill anymore. And there's a lot of members that struggle with that. I think this comes around every 5 years. And my understanding is it was $800 billion 5 years ago. It's 1.5 trillion now. And so I'm not trying to argue in opposition. What I'm trying to say is, in my opinion, that's why it's not moved. And every single year that I've been in Congress, the first bill that I've launched is a single subject bill. That's not going to pass because that's not Washington, D.C. But the point is that there is merit in having these debates independently, because the reason that we're being held hostage, because that's what's happening, on critical components that we absolutely need, justified, is because this bill has been omnibused together to a great big bill that covers many things other than just what we're really trying to focus this on. So I hope I haven't messed up those facts too bad. But if you wonder why this thing hasn't moved, because there's so many good parts of it,
in my opinion, that's why.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. They're very helpful to us. We agree with what the important things are. Zippy is absolutely right. We've got to solve this immigration problem. Every farmer I talk to, employees is the number one issue. In fact, it's true of probably most businesses I talk to. And as you know, we're having construction going on. A lot of those people who have been working on farms are going into the construction industry. It is vitally important to agriculture across the country that we resolve this immigration issue. Now, Doug and I sat with some Democrats, a couple more Republicans, and worked on a bill and stuff. It's hard to get everybody together on that. Some people say you need broader immigration reform. That's true. But all of a sudden, you get it so broad that you cannot get consensus on anything. And so we tried to focus just on production agriculture. Processors wanted to know why we didn't put processors in there. Because then we bring in a different labor union that we have to deal with and stuff, and it makes it more difficult. Our thought was if we could get this passed, enacted it, and see how it worked, look at the weaknesses where they were and strengthen them and stuff, and then move it out, and it could be the model for other industries. So that's what we're working on, and I know Zippy's working on it hard. The Farm Bureau is, as is all of the other interest groups, because that's the number one issue with agriculture. But I will tell you, when you see some of the stupid things government does, a few years ago, they tried to take white potatoes off the WIC program. So WIC mothers couldn't buy white potatoes and stuff, and their argument was, well, we've done research and they find out that WIC families eat more white potatoes than the average American does, and so we need to cut down, we need to put them over into good fruits and vegetables and stuff. I said, oh, that's great. Then we found out a year later that wasn't true. But I offered an amendment in the Appropriations Committee that changed it so they couldn't take white potatoes off the list. But this is how stupid the rule was they were right. The reason they were doing it is because white parents ate too many white potatoes with children and everything, right? But they said, so you can't use your program to buy white potatoes in a grocery store, in an Albertsons or a Giant store or whatever. But you can buy white potatoes at a farmer's market because we don't want to harm them. I thought it was the nutrition that they were supposed to be after. But we got that adopted. Shelley Gingrich from Maine was my co-sponsor of the amendment. She had this mistaken idea that they raised potatoes in Maine. I finally come to the conclusion that only potatoes are only grown in Idaho. Beyond that, they're tubers. So while you're here, make sure you try sustainable Idaho potatoes. But one other thing on the milk stuff. I started putting, we got to build truth in labeling or whatever it was, where they had to tell you what it was exactly. And nobody seemed to want to enforce it. So I started taking little Post-it notes to the grocery store with me. And when I get some milk, I would post on the cabinet next to the milk that had all the almond milk and coconut milk, a little post-it said, it ain't milk. I don't know who took it down, but maybe all of us ought to start doing that. Anyway, thank you all for your comments. We're going to get into one of the other really important issues this afternoon a little bit out of the birds of prey, and that's permitting. Permitting is huge. And it takes far, far, far too long and too much of your time and energies in trying to get some common sense permits. So I want to know how to reform that is what I want. Anyway, thank you all.
Michelle, may I jump in on I want to compliment Mike Simpson on his work on that Farm Workforce Modernization Act. It was truly a bipartisan effort. It looked like how legislating is supposed to look. We all got in a room and our staffs got in a room separately, hammering it out, saying, what do you need? What can you do? What can you do? We talked about processors. That was kind of a bridge too far. Let's try this. Perfectly said. He was a main force on getting that through. We passed it in the House twice. Yes, we had issues on different angles on that. Some Republicans thought it was amnesty. That's ridiculous. When we see, just on my farm in California, reptile Governor Gavin Newsom pushed through a $20 an hour minimum wage for fast food workers. What does that do to distort labor costs for everybody else in the ag sector? What else? What do we have to do just to keep ahead of that so you're not losing a guy like, well, heck, I could be flipping hamburgers. So this is an ongoing effort. We need to get more broader agreement. Right now we're so poisoned with the border issue and stuff, I don't know how we have much of a conversation, which is really unfortunate, because this is what legislation should look like. And Mike was a lead force on that. Thank you.
Well, and I just have to take a little bit of license and add to that, you know, what, and I know we want to get into other topics, but on the immigration issue, I think one of the things that we have been really causing part of our problems is we're not separating the two, because immigration and the border is a hot button for a lot of people, and they're going to be opposed to whatever. We need to talk about visa reform. We need to talk about visas, because those are folks who want to come and work. And, you know, set aside right now, you know, the immigration and the border issues, because I think we sell better if we talk about visas and people who want to work, as opposed to when you say immigration, that dog whistle goes off for a lot of people. And so we need to make sure that as we try to sell what we are able to do to the American public, we do it that way so that we can get something passed. But I do want to turn a little bit, and we're going to have to kind of go into lightning round, because we're supposed to be done, my understanding is at 9:30. And so as the moderator, you know, I'm going to have to cut you off a little bit. But, you know, we've talked the farm economy issues. And, you know, last week there was a report released by the USDA that showed that farm income is projected to decline by $55.61 billion. 23%. And Zippy, I'd love for you to comment on, you know, what does that mean for not only the farm economy, but the bigger economy? And just, I know that's probably more than a 2-minute answer, but give it a try.
So to show the significance of that 23% drop, at the highest point of farm income, which I think was 22, 57% of the farmers in the census that year said that they were unprofitable. At the highest point. And then we talk about all the regulation and everything puts pressure on us. That profit margin is so slim. Just one bad regulation or one thing could happen to take that farmer out of business. And that is a chain reaction to the rural community and all the businesses that depend on the success of those farms being able to sustain themselves and stay on the ground. That's as quick as I can do it, because I can get it.
Well, and I think we all do understand that kind of that trickle-down effect, so to say, you know, and how it affects, because we need strong rural communities and how that affects everything when that's happening. And we've got flooding in Minnesota, and we had drought last year, and so lots of things that just can do that in one little turn. But also wanted to, Gregg, if you could just add more, you know, on the trade and talk a little bit about that, USMCA and some of the things that are going on.
Well, it's no coincidence that the high water mark for ag income was the high water mark for U.S. ag exports at $195 billion. That's the first point of this. I spent a year of my life, 2019, negotiating the China Phase 1 agreement in the Trump administration for agriculture. We fixed 57 different things in agricultural trade between the U.S. and China. It allowed us to take our U.S. ag exports to China from $26 to $38 billion over the course of just a couple of years. But I want to get really pointed on this for a little bit. What most people don't understand and realize is that in the days after that agreement, for months afterwards, we were talking to the Chinese every single day at USTR. We fixed a mountain of little problems, not just in agriculture, but across the board, that allowed trade to occur. You get commerce going. We begin to develop a rapport and a trust. And I'll tell you, when we started that conversation, there was it was an icy road. When we finished the conversation, we had learned a great deal about each other and where we're going. Right now, the situation is the Chinese economy is a wreck. It is not good. Their demand, overall consumer demand, is not good, and there's no replacing that demand. But the Biden administration, in my opinion, made a gigantic mistake. When they came in, they stopped talking to China. Just full stop. Well, you know, I actually had a conversation with Secretary Pompeo about this, and I said, you know, we need to figure out a way to keep food out of this greater geopolitical conversation. It's not in our best interest. And we talked about the basic concept of keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. And the fact that we have to get back to some sort of a relationship with China. You know, probably was 6 months ago and talking to your colleagues on Capitol Hill about a trade agenda and trade promotion authority and where we go. And 6 months ago, it was very clear the answer that I got to that was not interested, not a priority, period, full stop. But I will tell you, in the last few weeks, since the August recess, everybody's beginning to hear the chirping about commodity prices. I've had these same folks come to me and say, we've got to figure out how to get the wheels back on the wagon on agricultural trade and how we get an agenda going. That's right, folks. You got to sell it or smell it. We have to get this thing back on track. And I have ideas. I talked to Secretary or Ambassador Lighthizer quite often. Just talked to him here quickly this morning, a little bit about some other issue. Happy to have that conversation. How do we get this thing going again? It has to be a priority, folks. There's no other way to improve the plight of farm income other than trade.
Absolutely. And, since you mentioned China, and I want to add Kim in here too, but, what about we just last week, or I think we passed it came out of rules, but the issues of land ownership by China or any other foreign countries. And I'm just kind of, if you have any input on that and how you feel about that, or are your producers feeling that squeeze at all, or?
I would say absolutely. This is an issue that NCBA has very strongly supported, having a Secretary of Agriculture serve on that committee. Our concerns about foreign investment, we are certainly ripe for cyber attacks from overseas and foreign animal disease threats from overseas as well. So we certainly support anything that gives farmers and ranchers a permanent seat on that committee, and that's been the approach that NCBA has taken.
I have to punt on the land ownership because we haven't taken that up. But can I mention on China trade? Potatoes were part of that phase 1 agreement, but the challenge that we've run into is on the China side of things, and I think it goes to what Gregg is saying, is because you don't have robust dialogue between the two countries, the implementation of these ideals just falls apart. So we have access, but they're not providing the import permits, the regulations, the guidance that are necessary to actually get product flowing. And so effectively, you really don't. The market access is there in name only.
Zippy?
Foreign land ownership, you want to talk about something passionate to farmers and ranchers, they get passionate about that. And if you look at the statistics, it says that only less than 3% of the farmland is owned by foreign countries. We think the process of how we measure what's really owned and controlled by foreign countries or companies from foreign countries is not accurate, because we think it's a lot more than 3%. So we think something needs to be done with how we measure that. And if you want to talk about trade just for a moment, I think we ought to give this man a big round of applause, because I worked with him when he was sitting in his seat, and he was a tremendous asset to agriculture in this country and the people of this country. I'd like to give him credit.
Well, and then I will just, last question, and just kind of a round robin or however, but, and this is a little bit of a Ways and Means question, because, but the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is expiring. So much of it's expiring in 2025, and we're already, we've got the tax teams together. I happen to be vice chair of the Rural America tax team, and so we're out there trying to figure out, make those priorities, create those priorities. And so, maybe asking your priorities, but asking how you're feeling about it. What should we be focusing on? I'm just
going to start it out this way. So very simply. If you screw this up, nothing else matters.
Okay, thank you. That just sums it up for me.
Absolutely. This is the top priority next year. This has to be renewed and redone correctly for U.S. agriculture, or it doesn't matter.
I will take that back. That's easy to remember, and I will take that back.
And that's
of the Ways and
because you're going to discuss that next year is the reason you got to do a farm bill this year. Because you sure don't want to do them in the same year.
Well, you won't get the farm bill done until the end of next year if you spend the first 6 months talking about taxes.
Yeah.
And we talked about that narrow profit margin, net income for farmers and ranchers, and how critical that is. You mess that one up, and it'll take us all out. And it also takes out a big piece that helps us continue the generational farms. Being able to pass your farm on, whether it's your son or daughter, or whether it's a young man or woman that wants to be involved in agriculture. We gotta have those tools to be able to pass that land on and sustain those farms for all Americans, not just the farmer itself, but all Americans are dependent on us to continue to do what we do, because we don't want some other part of this world feeding us.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't think we talk about that because it affects small businesses, it affects big businesses. If you want to pass it on, and Kim,
I was just going to underscore that right there. The estate tax relief is the most critical part of that for cattle producers, of course. When I've heard people talk about 2% of Americans are involved in agriculture, it's less than 1% that are cattle producers. So if my hands are tied and I'm unable to pass my ranch down to my children, that's going to continue to contract. A couple other points, we're very focused on stepped up basis and like-kind exchanges. Those are critical and CBA priorities in the tax bill.
And it allows us to reinvest in our businesses.
Absolutely.
And prepare them for the future.
Anyone else?
Well, since we're short on time, we're all part of a coalition together, so this is the speed round of figuring out if we're all saying the same thing, which we better be if we're in the effective coalition. 98% of all farming operations in the United States are effectively pass-through entities. And so all of these things are just exponentially magnified if these benefits start falling off. Bonus depreciation, estate tax, 179 expensing, all those things. Huge priorities. We've got to get that all made permanent.
Thank you, and I will take that message back. And one of the things that I talked about a little bit, and I appreciate it, is that when we worked, when you guys were lobbying the Farm Bill, it was very consistent. You came in, you talked about clear things, and I think that reflects it. That Chairman Thompson did an awesome job on it, and it reflects the needs and what you guys were looking for in that Farm Bill. And I think we need to do that same thing with our tax bill next year. And so I appreciate that you'll continue to visit with us. And I would just offer the opportunity to the members, if there's anything else you want to say in closing.
Russ? Just a couple of questions on what are we doing here. Why is the U.S. the #1 country for importing lumber products? Why are we importing more food than we're exporting? Why are we importing more of our minerals from somewhere else to produce all the electric vehicles? Why are we doing these kind of things? If you want to see a microcosm of it, watch our committees this week. From natural resources, we were discussing NEPA reform. It turned into this crazy Project 2025 situation with AOC and Huffman and them. Can I use the word show here? And then over in the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, we're talking about waters of the United States, and it wasn't as well attended a committee as it should have been. These are cornerstone issues for what we're talking about in the full gamut of ag, natural resources, and transportation. Why are we importing 90% of our pharmaceuticals from China? We need to just completely rethink American production on all these issues. So for ag and timber, man, what are we doing?